So hey, it's really nice to be here at the Cultural Center at the Successful Failures Show. Successful Failures, 30 years of Lumpen's Radical Media and Building Communities of the Future is an exhibition put together kind of celebrating the path of Lumpen magazine and dozens and dozens of projects that have occurred over the past 30 years that kind of work together to create this buddy system of activity in which we're engaged with art, activism, and culture in Chicago and beyond. I'm currently in the room in which we display the full collection of Lumpen magazines over the past 30 years. Lumpen actually started in Champaign-Urbana at the University of Illinois, and as a response to essentially the first Gulf War. A bunch of us who lived together, hung out together, became politically active in the environmental movement, and then quickly got engaged in the anti-war movement on campus. And during those times, there wasn't a lot of anti-war material out there. There were very few publications we could read to get kind of like an alternative viewpoint or a critical view on why we were going to war in Iraq. So being inspired by publications like Gutney Reader, The Nation, and other left-wing publications or progressive publications, we thought we would start our own zine, which we called the Lumpen Times, named after our house. Lumpen meaning basically you're somehow excluded or disenfranchised for your class or your kind because of your shiftlessness or laziness. And being shiftless, lazy people living the college life, we thought it would apply to us perfectly. So that zine came out as a Xerox thing at the college, and we did 5 or 6 or 7 issues while we were in school. And we really thought we were trying to provide the greatest dissemination of information on a specific topic like the war or about local issues in Champaign-Urbana. And we were pretty naive then. But that publication made me decide to go into alternative journalism and become part of the alternative media ecosystem, or try to be. So I moved to Chicago, moved back home to Chicago, and got an internship at these Times and started working there. And while I was in Chicago, I noticed there were no free or any publications out there that were kind of lefty, progressive, weird things that I could pick up on the streets. Back then, you would get tons of free publications at bookstores and bars like Estelle's, and you would go to Facets to go rent a radical video and pick up some literature, but there weren't many free publications except for The Reader, which of course is a legendary publication in Chicago. So I was like, it would be nice to start something cool that was free. So I put up flyers at Columbia College and School of the Art Institute asking people if they wanted to start a magazine to tear down the pig system, to meet me on a specific date. And we met there, and some were anarchists, some were lefties, some were long-term activists, and we met and we produced a thing with the name of The Paper. Because we could not agree on a name, we all consensus decision process determined The Paper was the name of our new publication. And that basically was the beginning of the end of The Paper, because that consensus project led to us having tons of meetings about crazy stuff like what font size should we have in a paper. And I think it was 6 or 7 months in, we had another meeting about whether or not it should be 14-point or 12-point font for bylines, and I just like, you know what, I cannot handle this anymore, I'm done. But I still wanted to do publications, so I asked my former colleagues in college who continued to contribute to the paper, like Steve Slobiani and Chris Molnar, Bob DeMa, Joe Collier, all these kids that I went to school with, to see if they would want to reboot Lumpen magazine, and they said they did. So we found a pad a couple blocks away from In These Times in Logan Square / Humboldt Park by Margie's Candies, and we rebooted Lumpen, which came out monthly as a large format newsprint publication that was freely distributed throughout Chicago, and we would print 15,000 to 20,000 copies a month, drive around in a van, drop them off at bookstores all over the city, and we started having meetings at Myopic Books, and we would meet all these weird writers and freaks, zine heroes at Quimby's. And it was because of Quimby's and Myopic that Lumpen actually started thriving and became a really interesting, irreverent publication for the city of Chicago. There were moments of like publication wars with like Letter X Poetry Mag. We were accused of doing all kinds of crazy stuff to like stop artists from developing the neighborhood. In fact, Lumpen became one of the few publications at the time to critique the artist's role in society in gentrifying neighborhoods like Wicker Park and West Town. And every other month there would be some hard-hitting analysis of real estate developers, et cetera. So we had a really good team of people who were assembled at the time, like Leslie Stella and Chris Molnar, who I mentioned before, and Nico Wojdak, and Joe Judd, the proprietor of Myopic Books, started a column. And it was a pretty interesting time. And through those 90s, these free papers were the internet. Going up to the street and looking at a flyer was how you got information. And the neighborhood itself was full of so many weirdos and freaks, musicians, artists, that we became engaged in all these different cultural activities in Chicago, whether it was being involved in the music scene, theater scene, art scene. And through those connections, Lumpen kind of emerged over time to create more projects based on those interests. The magazine then went digital at the time of the first .com age. We called ourselves .communists, and we created a project called supersphere.com, in which we thought, wouldn't it be incredible to take all the best alternative media in the world and put it online together? So we partnered up with 40 different zines and magazines from across the country. We started shooting concerts of independent bands in the basement of like the A-Zone, or at the Empty Bottle, or the Double Door. We would record live shows, put them up online on a matchbook-sized screen called the Real Player, and people would be able to watch this independent music scene that was flourishing in Chicago at that time, or that came through Chicago. We also had 3 simultaneous 24-hour radio stations that were streamed. We actually had a team of documentary filmmakers that traveled the world to cover the anti-globalization movement, where corporations were basically consolidating their grip on the world. It was a really insane time. And through that experience, we engaged with all these different communities and learned about doing hybrid festivals. So we brought that back to Chicago. In fact, we started bringing these ideas that we thought were awesome all over the world and wondered, well, why doesn't Chicago have a cool art magazine? Or why doesn't Chicago have a tactical media conference? Or why doesn't, all the things that we thought we should have here, we tried to create. And it was through that kind of do-it-together spirit that all these other projects emerged, which are showcased here at the show, at the Cultural Center. So Lumpen became this kind of beautiful soil in which we were able to grow all these different publications, all these projects, and eventually physical retail spaces or physical art spaces. We had a space in the early 2000s called Buddy in Wicker Park, and that was a crazy, insane space, a temporary autonomous zone that allowed hundreds and thousands of people to do experimental art, music. It was a place for gathering, for organizing protests against the Second Gulf War and further wars. So it was also an escape. It was an attempt at building a kind of parallel reality tunnel because we felt we were living in the dark ages with the ascension of the Republicans and George Bush, these endless wars, the surveillance state. It was through this culture of resistance that we tried to figure out even new strategies. We realized that without having our own space, we would constantly be shifted around. We would constantly gentrify ourselves out of neighborhoods. And that's why we moved to Bridgeport, the community of the future. And we established a base there with our gallery, Co-Prosperity. And through just serendipity and the certainty of chance, we were able to take over a bar and then create a brewery, launch a radio station, and build what we thought would be the community of the future. So that's why we're here today. And that's why you should join us on December 9th, because this entire show is about building future communities of the future. And we're here gathering to try to figure out a way to raise funds to continue all these amazing projects. So on December 9th, if you came here, you can get a ticket for cocktails, beverages, and great food by chefs that we've worked with in our community kitchen program. Another awesome program in which we've fed over 100,000 meals to people in need during these trying times. You can also hang out and check out some great art by our friends and contemporaries who we've grown up with and worked with over the past 20, 30 years. They've graciously donated work for us to raise funds to pay for future programming. So please, come by, join us, have a toast. Let's go, guys. We'll see you then.